Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another show. Today, I have a very special guest with me. His name is Yoni Baznatov. His last name is a pseudonym for confidentiality and security purposes. But Yoni served in the IDF and he also served in Gaza. After the genocide began in Gaza, he had fallouts with people who were very close to him. He still knows people who serve in the army, and he wanted to protect his identity. But we appreciate Yoni being with us. So Yoni, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Thank you for having me.
You're more than welcome. And I commend your bravery in coming up and speaking. But if we were to start it from the beginning, do you want to give us a little bit more about your background up until the point that led you to serve in the IDF and how things went from there?
Sure. And just to specify, I did see service in the IDF and I did see combat in Gaza, but not recently. We're talking about Operation Cast Lead, which is more than 10 years ago. So nothing, what's happening now.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, it's kind of interesting going all the way back. So I am Israeli American. My mom's American, my dad's Israeli. And my mom actually converted to Judaism after she moved to Israel in the 1970s. Yeah, she actually converted twice. First of all,
twice. Why twice?
Well, first of all, for Reform Judaism, which, Reform, it's popular here in America, but when you go to Israel, they don't consider that to be real Jewish because you can't get married or anything. They only consider, the Rabbanut and everything. They only see Orthodox Judaism. So she actually had to convert another time before she could get married to her, first husband.
Okay, so double Jewish.
Double Jewish, exactly. Double Jewish, double trouble, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so she converted to Judaism, and that was in the 70s. And my dad and her met, and got married and everything, had kids, had a beautiful family. And at the age of about 3 years old, so this was in 1989, you had, remember, that was around the first Gulf War.
Yes.
And around that time, Saddam Hussein was saying that, if a war were to break out, that he would be sending, missiles to Tel Aviv, which he did.
Yeah, and he did. Yeah.
I remember.
He threatened to send missiles that had, chemical warheads on them.
Yeah, they weren't chemical, but they were prepared for chemical.
And everyone was,
the whole
country was prepared for
chemical warfare. Yeah.
Everybody was afraid of it. And my mom, being an American, she freaked out and said, oh, heck no, I'm not staying here with that possibility. I'm taking the whole family back to America where her family was.
Yeah, of course. Wise decision.
Exactly. And she told my dad, hey, either you can come with me and the kids, or we're leaving you here, that's
okay.
So he saw the writing on the wall and he said goodbye to everyone. And my whole family moved to America in about 1989, 1990.
Mm-hmm.
And I was raised in Michigan. And, growing up, yes, my mom converted twice to Judaism. And yes, my father is, Jewish.
Yeah.
But I was not raised in a Jewish household per se. I mean, we kept the major holidays like Passover and Hanukkah. But my parents spoke Hebrew just to each other, almost like a secret code, secret language that we didn't understand. And they kind of raised us first and foremost as Americans, and also to kind of hide our Jewish identity. It's not something you don't wear the Star of David. Because my father, my father is a descendant of Holocaust survivors. So my grandfather, his whole family, his whole first family was killed in Treblinka, and I had 85 other family members, direct family members, great uncles, great cousins, stuff like that were killed. So he always kind of lived in that shadow of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism as it was, in the World War II era.
To kind of protect
himself.
Exactly. He was born right after World War II and, protect, better to be safe than sorry, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
And also, it's really interesting because my dad, he's not religious at all. He's almost like an atheist, I guess you could say. And my mom, she's spiritual, but she's not religious. I mean, she does her own thing. She has her own views on God. She doesn't share. So I was kept kind of away from that. And the household wasn't Zionist, although we do have Zionist roots in my family. And my dad, is I guess he's like the son of Zionists, and he also is Zionist, and he also served in the military too. He was an officer actually in the IDF and fought in 4 wars.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my upbringing. And my dad also had a really interesting peculiarity. And I think this isn't unique amongst Israelis, where they see American Jews as kind of being
light.
Yeah, light, nachnachim.
Light Jews.
Hebrew.
No full-fat Jews, yeah.
Well, also kind of like
Skimmed.
wieners, like scaredy cats, and not like these, big, strong guys, but kind of like running with the tail between their legs. And my dad was like, I don't want to associate with these people. So we didn't.
Yeah. I mean, I think, to be honest with you, it's very interesting that you say that, because firstly, I mean, I constantly spoke about the levels of Israelis leaving Israel.
Yeah.
And these are people who were born and raised in Israel, right? You're not talking about someone born and raised, and they don't like the way the country's going. And they go and immigrate, obviously, over 1.2, now probably 1.5 million in America permanently, not planning to go back to Israel. The numbers increased after the war in Gaza, after this genocide. And now they're complaining about the fact that they're losing the support of Jewish people around the world. It's as if they live on a different planet.
You live in this
brainwashed community, right, or country, right? You have so much censorship, and they don't really get what's going on, to a level where, if, for example, and that's on the mainstream media, because you still have people in Israel, and I monitor them and speak about them as and when, really, opposing the genocide, calling it a genocide. But if there were to be any criticism from the mainstream media, they will tell you, this is what the world thinks about us. This is how the world views us. It's because the world views what's happening in Gaza. That's why. And there was a study, actually, Channel 4 did. One of their journalists was in Israel. He had an interview with this young lady who refused going to the IDF and serve. She was jailed for a month. She was just released a few days ago. And for the people who don't know, if you refuse to go to the army for moral reasons, you're in trouble.
Say, I'm
against the war because I'm against the army.
You can get an exemption.
It's
absolutely. You're seen as a traitor.
You can be a radical, like Ben Gvir, who was too much like a radical right, anti-Arab maniac, and he was not allowed into the army, and that's fine. But God forbid you're progressive and you don't want to agree with what they're doing right now. It's horrible.
Yeah, exactly. So. They had a small study on the coverage in the news. So they covered the news in Israel for 5 days, and they said they didn't show one image of the people in Gaza on Israeli mainstream media and what they're going through to brainwash the people to a level where people think, oh, these people are putting makeup.
Yeah, they think they're crisis actors. They've so dehumanized them as they don't see that they're real, and they've disconnected it. I mean, they live in a bubble.
Exactly. They live in a bubble. And they don't see what's happening. But some people do. And obviously the people who do, some of them do speak up against it. But people don't know the level of censorship. Like if we talk about censorship, for example, in Western countries and stuff, you're talking about mass censorship with almost martial law, really.
So now they're calling to
implement martial law in Gaza.
It's a police state. They monitor everything, or they surveil all the phone lines. Everything is tapped. I mean, it's a police state. There's no way to go around it.
It's a police state, indeed. And I mean, since the beginning of this genocide, I mean, the Palestinian population in Israel they've been under such brutal laws and policing. It's unbelievable. Hundreds in prison, people punished financially for showing sympathy, right?
Yeah.
You're not talking even about supporting the resistance or whatever. You're talking about showing sympathy, highlighting the crisis. And I mean, to an extent, Israel succeeded in suppressing, voices from within. But there's a limit, obviously. This is going on for 6 months now. People took it to the Supreme Court, and you still have a bit more activity, albeit, one police officer per one person, if you'll see a protest, really. So talk us through how it went after. So your mom was in Israel. Then she saw what happened with the Iraq war. Obviously, any rational person would be like, I don't want my kids to die in it. And I don't know what the hell is going on. Let me flee.
She had a passport. She had a way out. She took it. I mean, I can't believe it.
That's it. Okay. And your dad followed suit. So you all went to Michigan. So what happened afterwards? You were raised up in America, in Michigan,
and
went to public schools.
Public school. Okay.
Primary education, secondary education, high school, all that. When I was in high school, my parents divorced, and there was a couple years. Me and my brothers went to live with my mom. She at that time had moved to another state, and we went to live with her. And my dad, being Israeli, and all of his friends and support system was still back in Israel, he decided to go back there. Just prior to the first Lebanon War, or the second Lebanon War, so in 2006.
2005.
2006,
yeah. Okay.
And there was a period of maybe, I don't know, a year and a half where I hadn't seen my father.
So you stayed in America. He went on his own.
I stayed in America.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
He went on his own. I actually, at that time, I went to school. I started studying in university. But when you're that young, 18 years old, you don't know what the hell you want to study and, do for the rest of your life. So I wasn't taking it seriously. Well, my dad saw that I wasn't happy at school, and he came up to me, or he called me one time. We were talking on the phone, and he said, "You know what? I have an idea. You haven't been back to Israel since you were a toddler of 3 years old. Yeah, come. I'll show you the country, just come for a small visit, 3 weeks, that's it, and see how you like it." Okay, that sounds like a good idea. I miss my dad. I was interested. I wasn't really doing anything else in America at that time. So I packed a small bag. Again, 3 weeks worth of clothes, and that was it. I was going to go there, see everything, and leave.
Yeah.
Ended up going, visiting the country, and I don't know, I just fell in love with it. My dad is largely responsible for that because he is very, very knowledgeable about, culture and about history. So during those 3 weeks, we took road trips and we went to different cultural sites and museums, and we went to the beach there, the Mediterranean, the beautiful Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And, he's one of these people. He knows history like the back of his hand. He knows biblical history up until Ottoman history, and even now modern, political things going on. And the beautiful thing about Israel, as you know, is that every square inch or every plot of land, there's a story to it. Whether it's a biblical story,
it's a beautiful land.
It is
rich history. Yeah,
rich. We're talking, 5,000, 3 to 5,000 years of history going back to the Canaanites, right?
Yeah.
And me being a lover of history, and in fact, that's what I was studying in university, absolutely fell in love with it. And I had made friends there too in my short time. He was living in Ariel, which is a settlement.
Ariel,
the biggest settlement in the West Bank, maybe
in the West Bank,
half an hour south of Nablus, Shechem, as they call it in Hebrew.
Yeah.
You have nowadays about 25,000 people living there, so it's not a small city.
Yeah.
And I was making friends there, and I said, you know what, this is such a great place. It's a shame I have to go back. And he said, well, guess what? You don't have to. You don't have to go back to America. You can stay here. With the only
How about your siblings?
Did they stay in America?
Yeah. I do have siblings. I have a sister and 2 brothers.
Okay.
They stayed back in the U.S. or they go back to Israel as well?
My sister will do occasional visits, I think she's the most connected because when she came to America, she was already older. She was like 9 years old. My older brother, he's 2 years older than me. No connection at all. And my younger brother, he was 1 year old when he left, when he came to America. And he's been back and forth. He did that, what is that trip that they have the American Jews take? I can't even remember the name of it because I never.
There's lots of guided tours.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a week that's on them. They go and show them.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that, and I just went. Was it Taglit? I think it's called. Yeah,
Taglit, yeah.
One of them, yeah.
So he did that program.
Well, there's several. There's one for the general population. There's one for the celebs.
There's one for the influencers. There's
Well, he's no influencer, I'll tell you that.
Okay. All right.
Not yet a celebrity, but he did the general. Yeah.
So you decided to stay there. Then what happened?
Well, I decided to stay there, and because I decided to stay there, first of all, I needed to know Hebrew. And as I explained before, my parents used Hebrew like a secret language, a secret code only between themselves that us kids wouldn't understand. So, I knew 2-3 words of Hebrew and that was it. I had to actually sign up for an ulpan, what it's called. It's an intense Hebrew language course. They offer them on kibbutzim. A kibbutz is like an agricultural farm.
Yeah.
And I went to one near Haifa for 6 months, an intense program where it was 1 day in the classroom and 1 day working. So you work in the kibbutz. And I was actually a gardener on the kibbutz. So that was really nice because, I'll tell you about that story too.
Yeah, sure.
That was 6-month intense program where you learn Hebrew. And I was supposed to go into the army right after that. So I'm talking about, June of 2007. I was supposed to join the army.
So you missed the Lebanon War.
I did miss the Lebanon War, and good that I did. I don't need that in my life. But I was supposed to go into the army right after the program, and I decided that
did they contact you, or did you kind of volunteer? If you don't mind me asking.
Well, my dad, he was like, "Well, that's weird. You've been here for at that point, 6 to 8 months." He's like, "Well, you haven't been contacted yet by the army. Let's go to the Lishkat Gius. Let's go to the let's go to the army base and see." So he took me again. I speak very little Hebrew at that point. He's like, let me find out what's going on. I want my son to be in the military and all that. And, And so I was supposed to join in June, July, but I had glasses. I wear glasses. And I said, well, if I'm going to be in the military, I don't want to be, working behind a desk all day. I actually want to be in the field. I want to be out, working, fighting, doing all that stuff. I want to be in a combat unit. The only way I could do that is to repair my eyes and get LASIK surgery, which I did.
Yeah.
But because of that, they said, oh, well, your eyes need some time to recover.
Yeah.
We're not going to, call you up and conscript you until 6 months from now. So I decided, well, I'm waiting around for a couple months, and then I got bored. So I decided to go to another kibbutz, and that was kibbutz Yotvata near Eilat, so all the way down the south in the Negev. Beautiful place. Yeah. But on the first kibbutz, I told you, going back when I was a horticulturalist or agricultural gardener in kibbutz Mishmar Emek. That is also the first time I actually had contact with the local population, with the Palestinian Arabs. Yes, there was a guy there. He was a guy, really nice guy. His name was Ahmed. He lived in Haifa.
Ahmed, very popular name.
Very popular name. Very very nice guy. Used to bring coffee. Strong Arabic coffee in the morning, start the day, and just always had a smile.
Gives you
always
a kick.
laugh. Oh man, yeah. So that's when I first, had my experiences with, the Palestinians. So it's very interesting.
And how was it? How were you kind of told something about the Palestinians in Israel? Because usually many people who say, well, they'll go there for the first time, for example, they're warned about the Arabs or the Palestinians or this. Was there some sort of indoctrination, or was your father was one of those people who kind of knew people on both sides and had a bit more of either an open or kind of different approach to this?
my father, to his credit, he is multicultural and very intelligent, intellectual, and very humanitarian. Things have changed that make him, I think your views change as you get older. But he had this saying that kind of wrapped up his whole view of, the Arabic world and the Arabs in and outside of Israel, which was lachshod v'lachbod, which in Hebrew, in English, that means suspect but respect. Suspect but respect. You don't have to love them, but you have to be respectful and treat them like human beings and all that. So yeah.
I get it. So from then you did your laser. So you had that rest. How long was it? Like 6-8 months, the rest?
Yeah, it was about 6 months. I got conscripted in December. So 6 months later after I did my LASIK surgery.
Okay. And how tell us a little bit more about your experience in the army. How did it start? How did it go?
That is interesting because for outsiders, for foreigners, especially those who their Hebrew is not really great. Maybe they did the UPAN, maybe they didn't, but it could be better. They put them into a preliminary program, I can't remember the name of it now. It slips my mind, but it's like a 3-month boot camp mixed with like a Hebrew course, which they try to teach you like military Hebrew, let's say. So you learn all the military terms like gas masks and weapons and all this stuff. And the program, like I said, it's 2.5-3 months. It's like a boot camp too. It's like an introductory to boot camp. Very compared to my other time in Golani, it was pretty easy. But the interesting thing is all the commanders there are women. They're all women. And they're beautiful women too. But it's really interesting. You have these really beautiful women, dressed, in military gear, commanding respect. And you have, people that come from all over, whether it's Russia or the ex-Soviet, satellite states or America or South America, all there. People who don't know anything about the military or anything, having to follow orders and run around. So it was quite interesting. It was, I look back on it, I can laugh.
Yeah. So you took part in some combat when you were in the army? Yeah. Which battles did you participate in particularly?
Well, particularly, so after that program was over, I was able to choose which unit I wanted to go into.
Which one did you choose?
Well, that's interesting because my father, he was an officer. He was a radio officer, and he served in Golani, which is the most veteran combat unit there.
The most,
He told me, just don't go to the armored brigade because you don't want to be stuck in a tank, and just don't go to Golani. And where did I go? I ended up going to Golani, despite him.
So why did he not want you to go to Golani? Is it because of the levels of tasks that they take and
he says Golani is Abu Ali, it's like they're not serious and they're just kind of like they're kind of like he always wanted me to go to the paratroopers or whatever, and the paratroopers, it's really interesting when you look at the demographics and the breakdown of the military. So you have a lot of Ashkenazi Jews, Jews from European descent, going to the Tanchanim, to the paratroopers. But Golani is the opposite. Golani, as my dad would say, it is the best Arabic unit in the world. The best Arabic unit in the Middle East, because it's full of Arabic Jews. Druze and Ethiopians and Jews from Moroccan background, Yemenite background,
the Mizrahi Jews,
the Mizrahi Jews, exactly.
Sporadic Jews,
So then you have someone like me, and you see the color of my skin, I kind of stand out.
You're not suited for this thing,
But he warned me, and I decided to go anyways. And I went through boot camp there, and boot camp is about 4 months long. And then they have a secondary extended training, which is another 4 months long. And then they have like a specialized training where you're trained on a specific weapon system or something like that. I'm a portable missile specialist and a sharpshooter by trade, and also a gunner on an armored personnel carrier. So after that whole year long of training, that's when you're finally done with the whole, the whole course. And it was at that time that Operation Cast Lead broke out. So we're talking about, end of 2008, early 2009, December
2009, yeah.
Exactly, December 2008, January 2009. So that is, we were all trained up and ready to go, and they gave us the green light, and we went into to Gaza, during Operation Cast Lead. But funny enough, the ironic thing is, when I was looking back the other day, trying to think, in my memory, wrestle my mind, why did we even go in? What started that whole, Operation Cast Lead? I couldn't even remember. I don't even remember why we went in anymore. Maybe they launched a couple missiles, maybe whatever. But you put a gun to my head.
That's the thing, though.
Does Israel need an excuse? That's
the thing, to be honest with you.
The ironic thing is, when you're telling me about that time you went in, that was when I was protesting in Israel against the war, right?
Okay, so we're just on two different sides. It's interesting.
Exactly, a bit the opposite, right? Yeah. But I remember that period very well, and Israel never needed any excuses. Really? Every time they can come up with an excuse. Like, people say, oh, is this a pretext to do that? It's like, dude, they don't need a pretext.
Yeah,
they can go on war whenever they want to.
Yeah,
they can go on a targeted assassination whenever they want to. Why? Because they'll tell you this person was in charge of X attack, for example, 20 years ago. So we need to kill him.
Or they just make shit up, or they just, pardon my French, but they don't need evidence. They shoot first, ask questions later.
Absolutely, shoot first, ask questions later. So it was no different at the time, really, in Gaza. And the funny thing is, because I post a lot of videos and updates about the war, right, as the day-to-day things, what happens from Israeli sources, Arab sources, right, English sources. The funny thing is that the Israeli leadership at the time, they used to say the same things that they say today. We're going to destroy the Hamas. We're going to eliminate them. We're going to make sure it's not going to be a threat anymore. All of a sudden, during the war, these objectives start to kind of get filtered bit by bit. We want to hurt their capability. And they were much less capable in terms of military
at the time. Totally. Yeah, they were not as dug in with all their tunnels as they are nowadays either.
No way. And they didn't have such sophistication in terms of production and all sorts. So from day one, when I heard the Israeli leadership saying we want to demolish Hamas, I was like, dude, that's really a lose
situation.
They set the bar too high. I mean, that's
way too high.
Way too high. So what was your take after you participated in Gaza? What did you make of it, of this whole experience? I mean, being in a soldier in an army that you no longer necessarily believe in, right? Or you can be sitting on the opposite side, must feel a little bit different. Do you feel like any, either regrets, or do you feel like, oh, it's good, I'm glad I went there to open my eyes? How do you feel about it?
Well, nobody looks back at, combat with nostalgia. It doesn't happen. But I did, it's really interesting. Okay, so when I went in, Operation Cast Lead, the first few days that we went in, I actually saw with my own two eyes that the Israelis were using phosphorus rounds. The phosphorus rounds, which, are illegal under international law. I saw them shooting that
to
populated areas. But at the time, I didn't know what it was. You see it has a very distinctive pop, like a cloud, and then you see these
from the sky then going
down. Yeah.
And I didn't know what it was, where it came from, what it was for. I didn't know it was banned or illegal or whatever. It's only after we got out, because when you're in Gaza, you're not, that's before cell phones. Even nowadays, I think if they went in, they couldn't have connection to any phone or anything like that. So you only are told what, news is being conveyed by your, commanding officer. You're kind of in a bubble. You're focused on
absolutely 100%.
I didn't know what the whole thing of what was going on until after I got out, and was able to then piece things together day by day. Oh, this happened, that happened. I was actually in the hardest hit unit also in Operation Cast Lead, but I was in the hardest hit unit not because of Hamas, but because we actually we had an incident which was a friendly fire incident. And from
I'm not surprised.
Well, yeah, we captured some houses, and one of our own tanks thought there were terrorists inside, but it turned out to be us and shot us.
Which is what's happening now.
Yeah. There's nothing friendly about friendly fire. I tell you that. Been there, done that. I also had talking about Hamas's capabilities. Thank God their rocket technology was not as good back then as it is now, because the first night that we went in, it was raining that night, and we were marching all night just to get close in, and that was near Jabalia. And I remember all of a sudden, it's me at the front as a sharpshooter, and we had another machine gunner, and I heard this shoo, and I see this like mud fly up.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't bang, but I saw everybody, get up and run. And the guy next to me got up, and I swear to God, I've never seen this before. He got up and he threw his gun and he ran away. And
Okay.
I looked at him, I said, well, what's going on? What happened was one of their rockets actually fell maybe 3 to 5 feet away from us, away from my head.
But it didn't explode.
It got stuck in the mud and didn't explode.
Okay. So
the rain saved you.
So yeah, exactly. The rain saved me, and I picked up his gun. And I said, "Well, what the hell? This is how you are. You throw your gun and you run." So I saw at that moment what my dad meant by Abu Ali.
Yeah. Of course, the front lines, because you need someone to sacrifice with their life, right?
Yeah.
And many people don't realize that there's this institutionalized racism against Jews from non-European descent.
There is a hierarchy.
And I mean, when you spoke about the immigration, like the initial immigration aliyahs, as they call them, were primarily from Europe. And Israel started to bring more Jewish people from Arab countries because of demographics. Because Ben Gurion at the time, he wanted an even higher demographic, right, of Jewish demographics, where we need to be the vast majority, big majority. But it's very interesting, really, sharing. I mean, it must be sometimes hard, of course, because many soldiers who go through battle suffer so many things, really, PTSD.
Some people.
Luckily, thankfully, I haven't had any issues. Knock on wood. It's
Yeah.
That's good. So after you finished and you started to kind of review what happened, did you feel like you were misled during that time, or?
Well, I started seeing things that made me unhappy at that time, like the use of those phosphorus rounds. And at the time, first of all, the IDF, their first step was deny. Oh no, we never used those. No.
Of course,
that's not us. Of course. Yeah. And then they said, well, we did, but we only used a few. And then we did, but it wasn't towards populated
civilians.
Exactly. All things that you're
but then
we
did it. But what can you do about it now?
Raining. Exactly. It's and they said, and then finally they said, we did, but it was a mistake. It'll never happen again. Well, it turns out, a couple months ago, they did the same thing in Lebanon. I see it, and I'm like, God, I'm looking at the TV, and I'm like, this is exactly what I've seen.
In Gaza.
And in Gaza, exactly. And more than that, I actually saw because later on, I actually befriended the unit that had fired those shells, and I actually saw the stockpile actually in the crates, and it was written, in English. So I knew these came from America. These were like American phosphorus shells. So even back then, I mean, everybody knew that, we got our primary weapons, the M4s that we use, the M16s, and all the ammunition. But then I saw, even this stuff that should be not used under international law, even that stuff is coming from America. And I said, that's not good.
But dude, it's just a highlight, really, when you talk about international law, really. I mean, we as Palestinians know that from day one, right? Israel never paid any
sort of attention
to international law. We have international laws. We have UN resolutions that protect the Palestinian right to return, that have resolutions that say you must have a Palestinian state. You have resolutions hailing the Palestinian resistance, right? Everything is ink on paper. You know, the US vetoed over 80 resolutions, right? And decisions against Israel. So there is no real international law. It's ink on paper, and it's there implemented on the weaker, more impoverished countries. And I think things are changing bit by bit. But at the moment, the thing is, when you talk about the conflict now, okay, so we've been over 5 months into this genocide, right? And they're not going ahead with a ceasefire. Netanyahu is delaying everything. Many people can see that he's doing it for his own sake. He doesn't care about anyone but himself. He doesn't care about the Israeli population. He doesn't care about the army. He doesn't care about anyone but his political career. And I was just speaking yesterday that if the polls show that Netanyahu, if we had an election, for example, tomorrow or next week, would be the prime minister, if an early election happened, he would probably end the war because he knows his future is guaranteed. But because he knows in the polls, Benny Gantz will win, if you have any elections tomorrow, he will continue the war.
For as long as possible.
Because he doesn't quit.
Exactly. There's no reason for him to quit. And what I wanted to ask you is, from your perspective, seeing as how things are going now, how do you see it ending?
Well, my fear is, again, because, you know, Netanyahu has tied his not just political but legal life to this war. You know, he can't lose power or else he's going to go to jail on bribery charges. All the incentive is on him to perpetuate the war indefinitely and maybe even go into Lebanon. Why not? I mean, you know, they're already talking about it. They're serious about their plans. You know, so
and they have plans for Lebanon.
I know plans. They do. Yeah, they've always had plans. You know, but now they're.
So do you think it'll escalate?
Do you think it'll escalate before we might reach a solution, or do you think there might be like a magical moment of, oh, look, okay, no problem, we will have a ceasefire, albeit temporary, and an ongoing conflict, and then things would escalate again?
I do not think that Netanyahu will ever do a ceasefire or a prisoner swap, because he got burned last time they did a prisoner swap. Well, what was in 2012 that they swapped 1,200 Palestinian prisoners for Gilad Shalit, and you know,
1,049, I think. The
number was. And Yahya Sinwar was one of them. And so he kind of, I mean, people already blame him for that and all that, and he doesn't want to look bad again. It's all, especially in Israel, politics is all optics. You do not want to appear weak. And he appeared weak. I mean, that's it. His whole thing, it's just, he wants to be the strong man. That's why he's doing these anti-democratic tactics, almost, you know, fascistic, if you ask me. And he's trying to be the top dog, and, you know, it's all for his own, save his own ass.
To save his, exactly. And the thing is, he's disregarding everything to do with Israel as a state, which is really fascinating. I constantly monitor what people people who had really senior positions, like if you talk about the head of the Mossad, Tamir Prado, for example, people from the intelligence community, people who were in the military intelligence directorate, Amman, right? People who are in the Shabak, criticizing what this man is doing. And they have a very rich experience in these things, in deals, in wars. You know, the head of the Mossad said, if we continue down this path, we're doomed, right? Do you need any more stark warnings like to stop this? But it seems like no one is stopping him. And now they're even pushing things against the international community, including the biggest ally, the US. Like the latest thing that I heard of is Ron Dermer, who's very, very well linked in the US, right? He's the Minister for Strategic Affairs now.
Okay.
He said, we're going to go into Rafah, even if this makes deeper cracks in our relationship.
With America.
They don't care. They're ready to burn everything down. They really are. They don't care. It's like a horse with blinders on. They're just.
But it seems like a suicide mission.
Well,
to me, it looks like they're committing suicide.
What do they say? How do they say in Arabic? Alayhi wa ala da'i. On me and on my enemies too.
Me and my enemies.
Yes, exactly.
That's how they do it. They're ready to burn it all down.
It looks like it, because it doesn't seem like anyone, even remotely close to this man, it doesn't seem like they have any ounce of sensibility when it comes to their situation internationally, when it comes to even the Israeli population, even the families of the prisoners. Like if I was an Israeli who had someone, right, kidnapped to Gaza, I'd be fuming.
Dude,
Yeah,
I would
be fuming. Firstly, they started bombing Gaza immediately with such massive bombardment. And in the first 30 days, they killed 50 Israeli prisoners in Gaza. Witnesses who left Gaza, prisoners who were released, said they were bombing us as and where they were going. Now, the toll reached approximately 80. And some of them, they knew that they were there.
For example, with the assassinate.
I'm sure it was all intentional. I don't believe in coincidences.
Exactly.
They have the Hannibal directive, and they told us that when I was in the military. They said, if you are in threat of being kidnapped, if you're in a combat and you're in threat of being kidnapped or taken alive or even dead, with a dead body, they're going to make sure to, try to destroy the body. That's it, because you can't barter with what you don't have. It's all about the prisoner swaps and everything. I mean, we knew that. It was an open-ended secret.
But they said it in the form of the body not alive, right?
Well, that's the thing.
To make it
sound to make it sound a bit more acceptable.
Exactly. We've seen that they're willing to trade even dead bodies for prisoners, and I think at a certain point, both the military and the government are like, well, hell with that, and let's just make sure there's no body to even trade. No body, no problem.
I know. Do you think the idea of Zionism is dead?
Oof, I don't know. I tell you, there are a lot of supporters in really high places, especially here in America and the UK and the Western world. If it's not dead, it is dying. It is, at least Zionism as it was conceived of, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, it's not feasible. It's not compatible with the 21st century. And I think the more people are connected and see what's going on in Gaza and see what's going on in the world, there's no way this colonialist mentality, which is what Zionism ultimately is, can perpetuate itself in the 21st century without looking like apartheid, which it is,
Exactly. And I mean, from my perspective, like many people start to relate it with anti-Semitism. Firstly, what's your take on it? When anyone criticizes Israel and that they being blamed for anti-Semitism, what do you think of that?
I think that is just a fallback, a self-defense mechanism that is bullshit. Again, pardon my French, but it just offends me, because even myself, having served and, shed blood, sweat, and tears, people either call me like Jews will call me, Israelis will call me an anti-Semite or a self-hating Jew. And I'm like, what? How dare you? How dare you? It's just one of these things. But ultimately, my issue with, criticizing Israel, everybody should be open to doing it, especially Americans, because, their tax money goes to paying for weapons and ammunition that get sent directly to Israel. And also because, as a democracy, how can you support this country that, for one, claims to be a democracy, but not for the many, but only for the few? Like, the whole concept of Israel is, as a democracy, is a farce, because you can either have a true democracy, which everybody has a vote and everybody has a say and everybody has rights, or you can have a Jewish state, which is, by the very definition, a theocracy. And you cannot, You cannot have a democracy and a theocracy exist at the same time. They're mutually incompatible.
Absolutely, but they make it seem as if it's acceptable.
Right.
Yeah,
So
well,
Constantly have a criticism of anything to do with remotely having any religious state, right? They promote secularism. Yet when it comes to Israel, they'll defend it and they'll highlight the fact that it's the Jewish state, the Jewish state, the Jewish state. Firstly, from my perspective, if you're worried about anti-Semitism, aren't you more worried about the fact that this country is speaking on behalf or in the name of Judaism, doing all of that, and you're supporting it? That's number one. Number two, why is it acceptable for a state to be a supremacist based on any religion? I couldn't care less, really. And any supremacy, I'm no pro-supremacy for anyone. I believe in equality. But why is it acceptable in the case of Israel and it's not acceptable for any other case? It's really absurd. And we constantly fight the notion. Like I personally distinguish and try and distinguish as much as possible between obviously Zionism, Judaism, Semitism, and the people in Israel. Like my childhood, my eye-opening moment, right, when I was a teenager, there was this event when I was approximately 17 or 18-year-old, and there was this political party. They had an event and they brought in Jewish Israeli people, children, as in teenagers, right, 18, who refused to serve in the army for moral purposes.
Okay.
And I met this guy and I was like, wow, so hold on a second, there are people in Israel that refuse this notion of the army, but why did I not hear about them anywhere? Why can I not hear about them in the
media?
It's buried. They bury all existence of such people.
Exactly. And then you start seeing organizations like Shovrim Shtika, breaking the silence, for example, or Mesarvim, right, refusing to serve.
Refuseniks,
yeah, and they call them the Refuseniks, right? As if they've done something awful, even though they've done a massive favor for humanity.
Amen. Yeah, amen.
For not serving. And that's why, from my perspective, it's very important to distinguish and to bring people together rather than divide them. Because all that they do and all that they're good at is dividing people, spreading hate between people, judgments on everyone. Like the moment you start to criticize them, oh, you're against our religion for that, and your religion is this and your religion is that, and it's because you're Arabs. And it's so important, especially now, to constantly highlight the fact that there are people who are different. There are people who are brave enough to come and say things as they are. How do you see, another thing that I wanted to ask you, the shift particularly in the Jewish community in America 6 months into this genocide in comparison to how it was before?
Well, you know, from what I've seen, I can't speak from personal experience, just because ironically, most of my friends here in America, since I've moved back from Israel, most of my friends here are actually Arabs, Muslims, Christian Arabs as well. So I'm not very connected to the Jewish community here. But, you know, from what I've seen in the news and on the ground, there obviously there is an element that is still very pro-Israel, and you know, AIPAC, for example, the American.
These are the
organizations, though, isn't it?
I feel like there's been a shift.
But they have a lot of money. But they have a lot of money, and they're steamrolling their propaganda because they see young people, especially young people, young Jews and young non-Jews, are seeing what's happening in Gaza and seeing what's happening in the West Bank and saying, we don't want any part of this, and we can't condone this. And so they're leaving in droves, and they're seeing the real threat. So AIPAC is coming back and trying to buy off politicians and trying to run ads and try to do what they can to keep the momentum running. You know, they just invited Bibi Netanyahu to the Senate, or to the House to speak in front of the House. Because everybody's, there is definitely a noticeable shift in the support towards Israel, especially amongst young people and Democrats and people who are just, more liberal, open-minded, progressive, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, to be honest with you, there's a massive shift. And the level that particularly Jewish organizations in the US are active is very intense, way more than before. Because even during previous escalations and wars, obviously there's an argument they didn't last as long, they weren't as bad, all of these things. But the actions from massive Jewish organizations in America is increasing very, very much, in my opinion. Is there anything you would like to add before we wrap up, Yoni?
Oh, I just wish this whole mess was over soon. You know, the funny thing is, this is what I'd like to end on. You know, when you live in Israel, the society there is so hierarchical and so segmented and pitted, you know, people against people, you know, Ashkenazi Jews against Mizrahi Jews and Jews versus Arabs and all that stuff. I mean, it is intentionally set that way, where only a few people benefit. But then you come to America, and like I said, most of my friends here in America are actually Arabs. They come from Arab countries. And you realize, wow, these people, you know, yeah, in the Middle East, we're all fighting over land and, you know, the small trivialities are what makes us kill each other. But then you come here and you realize Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Arabs, they're so similar, you know? Their cultures and their linguistics and all that, they have more similarities than what makes them different. So that was what was eye-opening to me. And I just want to leave the listeners to keep that in mind, that, you know, we have more that unites us than divides us.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's very, very important, to be honest with you. And you it's hard to realize that really unless you leave Israel sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to get out of the bubble.
Sometimes you're gonna get out of the bubble. If you get out of the bubble, you kind of would realize it. If, let's say, an IDF soldier in Israel from the army is listening to you, would you give them a message?
Yeah, first of all, I would say your prime minister, Netanyahu, has to go. I would not listen to any of his orders or any of his cronies. I think, you know, the old saying, a fish rots from the head down, that's Israel right now. I would refuse personally. And I was proud to serve. You know, I was one of these soldiers that, you know, I actually got an award for one of the best in my company. And I did my service proudly, but I couldn't do that nowadays just because I can't condone what they're doing. And just open your eyes. I mean, Jesus Christ, how can you live with yourself?
Lovely. On that note, Yoni, firstly, thank you so much for
joining us.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your experience, which I'm sure many people will appreciate listening to. And all of the best wishes to you, of course.
Thank you.
And to all of our viewers.
Pleasure. And to all of our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll end it there, and we'll see you in the next show. Thank you.
Sounds good.